And welcome, everybody, to another wonderful day right here on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. A wonderful week. Got a big show for you here. We've got not just UK, but now WKU getting caught up in still teaching DEI here in Kentucky, despite the bills passed last year. In order to combat this, we'll have Adam Guillette from Accuracy in Media, the undercover investigative group that has been doing these videos. So we'll have that today. Also, we'll be discussing one bill in the final segment there, Senate Bill 199, which has certainly caused a little bit of a rift, I would say, amongst some of the Republicans within the state regarding for glyphosate manufacturers specifically, but regarding a immunity from civil lawsuits as long as they have enough labeling for the EPA. We'll go over exactly what that bill does, what it says, the issues, the controversy with it. We'll discuss that here today. Before I dig down into it, please make sure you like, comment, share, subscribe. If you want to follow the show, head over to theandrewshow.com. If you're listening on radio or TV and you need to know where can you catch episodes, where can you watch every single week, well, there you go. Head over to theandrewshow.com. You guys can keep your emails, your questions, things rolling in. You can email me, info@theandrewshow.com. Once again, that is info@theandrewshow.com. So before we dig into the more serious issues, I had this funny moment actually with my wife yesterday where I've shown her the current viral video out there. Don't know if you've seen it regarding the McDonald's CEO trying McDonald's and clearly disliking it. For those of you who haven't seen the video, real quick, I'm going to play for you. I don't normally comment. I talk about state politics all the time, but this video is particularly funny and it does tie into state politics. But this is a McDonald's CEO trying a burger. And for those of you who can't see it, well, just listen to what he says. I'll tell you the important parts you missed there. Take a listen.
Here you've heard about it. Here it is, the Big Arch. This is something that we have tested already in Portugal, Germany, Canada. I love this product. It is so good. I'm going to do a tasting right now, but I'm going to eat this for my lunch, just so you know. So here we go. First, holy cow. God, that is a big burger. We've got a very unique kind of sesame poppy sort of bun on it. We've got 2 quarter-pound patties, a delicious Big Arch sauce, and of course some lettuce. So, there's so much going on with this. First of all, let's try to get this thing. I don't even know how to attack it. Got so much to it. Oh, there's also some crispy onions on here as well. I see those kind of coming out. All right, the moment of truth. That is so good. That's a big bite for a Big Arch. It's distinctively McDonald's. Only McDonald's could do this type of burger, but it also is unlike anything else on our menu. It's a delicious product. You know, you've got sort of the cheeses and the gooiness, but those crispy onions as well gives a nice texture. And of course, we've got the pickles. So I'm going to enjoy the rest of my lunch, but Big Arch, try it when you can get it.
So there you go. Clearly, he was very It's like the man had never seen a burger before in his life. And then the bite he takes, he's like, oh, that's a big bite for a big... It's not that big of a burger, first off. Second off, his big bite was like a tiny bite. Like I saw some other people making fun of him say it was like a Squidward bite from SpongeBob where he just takes like a little nibble of the burger and is like, oh yeah, that's so good. But anyway, so it's so awkward, it's so strange, and it looks like the man has no clue how to be like a normal person. And I only brought that up because I showed my wife that video as we laughed at some of the people making fun of it, and she goes, he looks like Andy Bashir. He acts like Andy Bashir. And she's so right. I'm putting up both photos now for those who can't see. Very similar. Pasty white guys, very fake, very, just clearly not like a real person, but trying to pretend to be that person he thinks everybody wants him to be, even though he's not. I mean, Bashir, he's out here peddling his weird LGBTQ Christianity. I mean, he's literally the speaker at LGBTQ events. I guess he's trying to out-gay Buttigieg in this presidential race, which, Buttigieg literally is married to a man. I don't know how Bashir is going to out-gay him unless he comes out as trans. It is an interesting line of course for him to take, but switching now to real serious issues, accuracy in media. Maybe you've seen a lot of their videos. We'll play one next segment from WKU. But before we switch over and hit the break, I do want to play this most recent video coming out of UK. In case you missed it, take a listen. This is an undercover investigation, University of Kentucky, I believe the history department, being asked about DEI.
One of the things we think about, what are things that look like to you that would use that.
Exactly. It's an inclusive learning facility. It's
absolutely.
Okay, so first
our history, I was going to say our history department.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I was still in the.
This is, I was going to say, our faculty fully committed.
In the state of Kentucky, DEI is banned from higher education. So we sent an investigator to this university to find out if they were following the law.
Hello. Nice to meet you. Pretty cool.
You're fine. Coming from California, we just more aggressive.
Okay.
Kentuckians.
Fair enough. That's okay.
I'm worried with, especially with community education, a lot of the issues that we're seeing with courses, racism. I don't want that to I understand that, I'm not teaching sports on that, but absolutely. I also want to be able to give my students a well-rounded view of this thing.
Yeah.
And I know that's going to depend a lot on just so many other factors, but
what is it gonna, one of the things we think about, what are things gonna look like 2 years down the way, 4 years down the road,
exactly.
those kinds of things,
And I don't want to kind of get into a program where I'm taught all these things teachers
not with this. Absolutely not with this. Absolutely not with this.
Okay, so it's an inclusive learning experience,
absolutely.
Okay, so
the
first
our history, I was gonna say our history department.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I was just worried I was coming and they weren't going to talk about anything DEI related, especially because I'm now going into schools where I might hopefully a lot of kids that I'm in. Okay, so DEI is still in the.
This is, I was going to say, our faculty totally committed.
Okay, I know there's a push to remove DEI, but as far as me wanting to go into counseling, I feel like that's an important part of
they're still
education.
hitting, I was going to say, they're still hitting the buzzwords still in our program are diversity and diverse groups of students.
Okay, so they haven't taken it out of the education programming at all. Okay, good. I'm coming from Texas and they have removed a lot of that from especially history, ELA, all of that. We can't, go in certain directions, but was
still in there.
Okay, DEI is still in the education curriculum here. Okay.
Absolutely.
There you go. I admit to it. Hey, we're teaching DEI in history. Why not? It is clear, people who want to sit there and defend DEI and say, "Oh, it's just teaching facts. You just don't like history." Blah blah blah. No, you teach history. DEI is talking about modern day things. Why do you need DEI in history? I don't know. But when we come back, we'll have Adam Guillette from Accuracy in Media, the people who did that undercover video. They have now also hit Western Kentucky University doing very important work. We'll check that out, and we'll have a discussion with Adam here when we get back on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Delicious. Oh, what's in here? Oh, well, what's in my tumbler here, the Andrew Cooperrider Show tumbler, available for sale at brewed.store. Is 1776, a brewed coffee, a Kentucky proud product that's roasted right here in Kentucky, of course. You can pick yourself up a bag at brewed.store. Free shipping on orders over $85. And they're sold in per pound, both ground, whole bean, and K-cups. If you like your little K-cup machines, we have that for you too. And the best part is per pound, it's cheaper than most of the boutique freedom-loving coffees out there. And this one's made right here in your own backyard. I know that's fantastic. So pick yourself up. We've got 1776, a French roasted dark blend which is historically funny because, of course, the French financed the revolution. And then also we have one of our other signature blends, Tyrant's Tears, a coffee that we meticulously harvest from famous tyrants like Annie Bashir, Pol Pot, and, of course, Mao. Additionally, we have other single origin coffees such as Cameroon Pea Berry, Kenya, Peru. Fantastic, fantastic blends. Go ahead and pick yourself up a bag today. Not only will you be supporting the show, but also you'll be putting in your mouth a delicious and tasty black nectar called coffee. To order yours today, brewed.store. Once again, it's BREWED.store. Brewed.store. Free shipping, orders over $85. Pick yourself up a bag and pick yourself up one of these spiffy tumblers. Andrew Cooperrider Show tumbler today. Once again, that's brewed.store. And welcome back, everybody, to the Andrew Cooperrider Show. As I mentioned in the last segment, we have Adam from Accuracy in Media joining us again, this time not talking about University of Kentucky, though we will touch on that, but they have a new video out from our great state here from Western Kentucky University. This is from, I believe, an advisor out of the School of Social Work there in Western Kentucky. Let's real quick take a listen to the video they put out, and then we will discuss with Adam from Accuracy in Media. Here we go.
To find out if they were following the law.
How are you? Good, how are you? My name is Bailey. I'm an office associate. 5 prerequisite courses that are associated with our program, like Social Work 101, a psychology class, a sociology class, a DEI course, which can be from a lot of different choices.
Coming from California, I was really worried because at least out there, I know like DEI works specifically like anti-racism. And,
right, precisely.
Is still like allowed out there, and I didn't know that coming to Kentucky it would be, but I mean, you guys have it in the program.
So that's what actually, this program, the entire Department of Social Work, and probably that's what most programs that are offered out in California or at any higher education, we're accredited by the CSWE, which is the Council on Social Work Education. Yes, if you go to, let's say you don't even want to go to WKU, if you go to a college that has a social work program that's accredited by the CSWE, yeah, it's in their curriculum standards that we teach about ADEI, anti-racism, diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yeah.
And that doesn't have anything to do with what the government would like us to.
Kentucky's DEI ban has a loophole which allows DEI to continue in curriculum. This is so that universities can meet accreditation requirements. As a result, states like Florida, Georgia, Texas, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Tennessee have launched a new accreditation body so that they can remove divisive DEI from education. Kentucky has yet to join.
At some point in time, the government gets a hold of our accrediting body and talks to them.
Yeah.
We'll deal with that when the time comes. But at the moment in time, we are literally required in order to maintain our accreditation to teach those things. So yes, it's a big part of our curriculum here.
Yeah.
And it'll be a big part of any curriculum. Yes, what any program that's accredited by them has to teach those things.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Gotcha. That was my big concern.
We are very adamant on maintaining that and keeping that a thing.
Amazing. Okay.
Until we hear from CSWE that we need to do otherwise, we will be keeping that.
Good. I was worried that legislation, because I saw like a little bit of what was happening here. I was worried that was going to come in.
No, and it's like super messy, 100%, but that's what it's in our standards. We have to teach our students that in order to give them an accredited social work degree. So we will continue to do so until we are directed not to.
Gotcha.
Yes, ma'am. No worries there.
Take action right now by clicking on the link below where you can send one message that goes directly to all of the relevant elected officials.
So, Adam, thank you for joining us first off. I know you're busy. I know you've got a lot of work you're doing. I see a lot of videos posted every day from all over the country. Either you have a lot of undercover people or you all are racking up those frequent flyer miles. Hopefully you're collecting there on the benefits, right? But I thank you, though, for concentrating some of your time on Kentucky. So we've had 3 University of Kentucky videos. Now we have this new WKU videos. Now, the WKU video is a little bit different. Correct me if I'm wrong, but when we look at the University of Kentucky videos, what we're seeing there is more of a flaunting of state law directly. Would you agree with that?
Yes. Now, this woman does go on to say in this video that they don't do what the government is trying to get them to do, which is always worrying from a taxpayer-funded employee. But the bulk of what she says deals specifically with curriculum, and that's where the Kentucky law fails.
And so when we look at University of Kentucky's videos where they're requiring essentially and injecting into their things like, I know I saw a history was one, right, where they have DEI involved. I mean, we just saw nationally a testimony about needing to queer up the maps, whatever that meant at the federal level. But, you know, in your opinion, when you're looking at what like UK is doing, do you see, for UK at least, those 3 videos you put out, do you see a line for Russell Coleman, our Attorney General, to be able to hold them accountable for that? You think they've crossed the line into illegality there?
In some areas at UK, I do worry about it because they talk about simply changing the names of the departments and continuing to do the same work. Now, they'll probably back up and say, well, we're only referring to curriculum, which is the loophole they hide behind. They just say, no, we just meant curriculum. But I'm sorry, anybody who's bragging about deception, I don't necessarily think that they're following the law. People adhering to the law don't need to engage in deception, and there is clearly a ton of deception at the University of Kentucky.
And the state law does say you cannot, unless it's needed for licensing, you cannot require that they take a DEI course in order to graduate. You know, teaching what they called decisive ideas, and including discriminating against people and everything else, which is, you know, so interesting. That's what DEI is. But on the flip side, when we look at WKU, there's, to your point, there's a loophole that says, well, if you need it for accreditation, let's rewind real quick. Who controls what a social worker needs college course-wise to be accredited? Because, you know, last I checked, and I could be super wrong, I don't think I am, the majority of social workers are employed by governments. So is the government deciding what's required for them to be accredited social worker to be able to work for the government, or somebody else?
Well, there's 2 answers, really. I would say the honest answer of who controls what it takes to get a social work degree, individuals like the radical in that video. Because the law doesn't matter to these people. They use any excuse, any loophole to push their politics into every facet of this education. We see it most commonly in social work, criminology, and education schools. When you wonder why your K through 12 schools suddenly are being run by radicals who care about indoctrination rather than education, these schools of education are exactly why. Now, what she's referring to are the accreditation standards that are required, and these radical accreditors insist on DEI. But I have news for the state of Kentucky. Florida passed a DEI ban that included curriculum, and it doesn't say you can never talk about divisive ideas. It says you cannot promote identity politics. And initially, the accreditors fought back and said, no, we require it for our accreditation. And the state of Florida legislature and university said, well, tough luck. And the accreditor backed down, and they still give out degrees, even though we don't have DEI officially in Florida's universities. The University of Florida is the 7th ranked public university in America, according to the U.S. World News Report's 30th overall, and they fully did away with DEI. If Florida can do away with it, there's no reason Kentucky cannot.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you there. Now, she did introduce a new acronym, ADEI, which, you know, I guess it's something. Why don't we go into real quick? Why do they feel a need to add in anti-racism? DEI is already kind of about anti-racism to begin with. Why is that even necessary? What is it? Why is it necessary in social work?
Yeah, for those unfamiliar with anti-racism, it sounds, innocent, like a good thing. Who's pro-racism? Not me. But what these people say is that in society, you're either racist or anti-racist. Well, then any normal thinking person is going to say, I want to be an anti-racist. Well, they define anti-racism as engaging in social justice politics, far left progressive politics, to fight against what they view as systemic racism that's inherent in America and inherent racism in capitalism. So essentially, they teach these students that you're either a racist or you're fighting for social justice, far left progressive policies to combat racism. There is no room for anyone in between. And what we see consistently is these universities are always adding more ideas and more letters to their acronyms. The ADEI is, becoming like the LGBTQ, probably the only letters in the alphabet that the K through 12 kids will be able to put together in the next few years.
So when they're talking about injecting this ADEI stuff into social work and it being a necessary course to take, Adam, in your opinion, I know you're not an expert on social work or anything else, but I mean, you obviously familiar yourself with the ideas. You see how deep the rot goes. What kind of negative effects do you think that will have as people get out into the world and fulfill the job of a social worker, where they're dealing with at-risk use and so on, and people who are maybe coming out of prison or anything else? What do you think the negative repercussions of those ideas will be when they're pushed onto social workers like that?
Well, first, let's be clear. When they talk about pushing DEI, they don't mean we're going to have a lesson one day, tell you what DEI is. It means they teach everything through a prism of anti-racism and DEI, which means all of their lessons are taught with anti-racism and DEI in mind and from that point of view. That's what we say when we talk about them embedding it in every facet of learning, because that's essentially what they're doing. So when they talk, say this was a math class, and we see this in K through 12. They teach math through a prism of DEI, which means they'll have sidebar questions in arithmetic books. We see this in K through 12 schools that say things like, what factors made it easy for you to solve this mathematical equation? What factors could have made it more difficult for other students to solve this equation? And that then prompts the teacher, who's been trained by an equity officer, to have a discussion about race and systemic oppression that's inherent in capitalism and America in math class. So that's what they're talking about when they talk about teaching through a lens of ADEI. Now, the negative effects, a Rutgers University study, not Hillsdale, not Liberty, not the University of Austin, a Rutgers University study found that teaching through this DEI prism creates divisiveness. It pits people against one another. Their study found that it caused people to see racism where it didn't exist. Because essentially, when you're teaching everything through a prism of you're either oppressed and the world's against you, or you're an oppressor who must opine for your sins, that causes people to hyper-focus on the differences, hyper-focus on faults that don't necessarily exist, and it's incredibly dangerous.
And it certainly does teach a victim mindset. Well, we're coming up on a break. When we come back, we'll continue to discuss with Adam. We'll do a little bit of a mean comment reading. How about that? I'll read some of the mean comments that have come in on a post I made about your work, and you can respond to them. We'll have fun with that and further discuss exactly the negative ramifications of these kinds of things, not just in K through 12, in universities, but also K through 12 when we get back here on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Do you hear that? I do. It's Bashir crying. Why? Because you're listening to the Andrew Cooperrider Show. And I thought to myself, why should we let those tears go to waste? Like any good capitalist, I said, that is a resource that can be sold. So we capture those tears from Andy Bashir and other famous tyrants like Pol Pot, Mao, whoever else. And we collect them up and we put them into a delicious coffee called Tyrant's Tears, available at brood.store. Once again, that's brood.store. You can pick yourself up a spiffy Andrew Cooperrider Show tumbler while you're at it and get yourself a nice bag. Free shipping on orders over $85. We have Tyrant's Tears in 1776, our signature blends. We also have flavored coffees such as Swiss chocolate and bourbon for those of you that want a little kick without the buzz from, alcohol. You'll get the buzz from the caffeine, though. Check out today. Brood.store. This is a Kentucky Proud product, roasted right in your own backyard. Brood.store. Support the show. It's cheaper per pound than most of those other boutique coffees. And it's available whole bean, ground, K-Cups. However you make your coffee, we got you covered. And you are back here on the Andrew Cooperrider Show, joined by Adam from Accuracy in Media. He's been doing some undercover reporting here in Kentucky, specifically in our universities about DEI policies are still going on, skirting state law, and DEI teachings going on that have found a loophole in state law. And in the last segment, we discussed kind of how we close that loophole, what some of the negative ramifications are. I know me personally, Adam, I remember this was 2 years ago or so. I ran for state treasurer. I finished second, but, no big deal. But anyways, it's funny. The guy who finished third was actually, he's a Republican, but he ran a consulting firm called, and ran a group called Anti-Racism Kentucky. And he was a DEI consultant. And he was running as a Republican. It was a real fun election. And a part of that discussion came up where one of the moderators tried to get me by saying DEI isn't taught in K through 12 education. I used the example of our local school district there, Fayette County Public Schools, of looking at kids showing up late. And they found that I guess black kids are showing up later more often, show up late to school or not at all, than white kids do. I don't think it was because specifically of their skin color per se. I don't think just because you're born black, you're born late to things.
Exactly.
Call me crazy, but but the Fayette County Public Schools looked at implementing a policy to create two different standards on whether or not you're late to school based upon a kid's skin color. Instead of addressing, probably the underlying cause wasn't skin color, it's probably something like a single parent household or something like that. And you know what? The white kids that are chronically late as well deserve to get help. And the minority children that need help, they don't need the standards changed to help them out. They need to just help showing up to school on time. Like, don't change the standards. But so we see those kinds of things. But I want you to respond to some of these mean comments, because we're recording this the day we're recording this earlier today. I posted about some of your work, and of course, comments come in. We'll start with this one. Teaching racism, LOL. Historical truths are not inherently teaching one to be racist. Now, that is a common refrain we hear from detractors, is that, well, we're just teaching history. This is just the way it is. You just need to accept it. Adam, what do you say back to those people?
I think all parts of history should be taught, even the uncomfortable parts, in history class. I've been undercover in over 250 K through 12 school districts across the country in red states. And that's how I learned about how they push the DEI, critical race theory stuff, even in math class. I jokingly put forth that I'd make a compromise. You could push all the commie nonsense you want in history class. I won't budge. Can we at least not have this in math class? And the people who say these things, I'm sure they come from a reasonable point of view. I don't think it's unreasonable to say we should teach all parts of history. That's not at all what we're fighting. Teaching people that they're oppressed and the world is against them, that capitalism is inherently racist, that America is systemically racist, that's not history, that's bigotry.
Here's another comment, and I'm sure you hear this a lot too, is whenever we talk about this, something along the lines of, we're miserable white people. This comment here, I'm so glad my life isn't as miserable as yours. I'm sure you see comments like that all the time, Adam. Is your life miserable? Why do you focus on this? Is it because, you have nothing better to do with your life? Why do you do it?
I'll tell you what, confronting these radical administrators in their own offices doesn't bring me joy. It does bring me a good degree of misery, although I take comfort in knowing that it's probably worse for them than it is for me, particularly because many of the offices we show up in, the people later lose their job. I think a half dozen administrators have been fired in North Carolina after being featured on our investigations in the past year. One was the dean of students at UNC Asheville. But the work is essential, even if it's often difficult, because students deserve to get an education focused on skills that will advance their career, advance their intelligence, advance their knowledge and their life, not activist nonsense that pits people against one another and causes them to see racism where it doesn't exist. At the same time, their tuition shouldn't be artificially inflated in cost, because we're paying for this massive bloat of administrators who are nothing more than activists. The taxpayers shouldn't be forced to fund taxpayer-funded activism. And I'll tell you, even these employees, you want to push far-left politics, knock yourself out. It's a free country. But do it at the Democratic Socialists of America, then you won't have to hide it. We'll all be better off if you're open about it that way. Don't do it at a taxpayer-funded institution.
Yeah, and we, there's a lot of comments along the lines too of DEI's a boogeyman or something like that. You're making it out something that it's more than it is. Example here, one comment saying, "Oh, a conservative podcast are looking for attention." I think kids call them media. The word used here is a more derogatory term than prostitute, but try attending to constructive issues this country faces instead of boogeyman syndrome. So I'm sure you hear that a lot, that this is boogeyman. It's not, I mean, even when they see videos where you're showing they're doing it still, you know, is it that they actually think this is a boogeyman that doesn't exist? Or is it really the classic, it doesn't exist, then you show them evidence it does, and they're like, well, it's good it exists.
That's exactly right. We're not breaking the law, but if we were breaking it, we were right in doing so. Well, which is it, you know? And honestly, you're right. People probably could think, this person could genuinely think that it's a boogeyman. And they could genuinely think, okay, this one video is edited out of context. I mean, we've put out, 40, maybe 45, maybe 50 videos in red state universities across the country with this so far. You know, as I said, a half a dozen people in North Carolina were fired. A state with a Democratic governor, a dean of students was fired. All of this is boogeyman. Not one of these videos where these people told us in their own words that they're doing this work was real. You know, obviously I don't expect somebody who hates what we do to go and study each of our videos, but at some point we can either believe this guy or our own lying eyes.
Yeah, I mean, at some point you have to just argue that it's good it's going on and stop pretending it's a just some made up boogeyman that's not happening at all. And, you know, people are, I mean, literally up until 2025, literally our university funding, they had a part of their funding that was tied to racial quotas. Like even the governor, this was in 2024. They couldn't pass the DEI bill, but they were worried about getting sued over the racial quota funding that was going on. And so they did pass a measure on that. And even the governor signed it here in the state, saying that, yeah, that's probably a Democrat far left governor. I'm sure you're seeing him all the time right now because he's running for president, talking about how he's the gayest governor to have ever been straight and gay at the same time. But I'm telling you,
Clinton was the first black president as well. I remember that one.
Yeah. Hey, man. But even he had to sign something saying like, yeah, okay, maybe that's a little racist. And so it is interesting to see them trying to belittle this as it's really not happening. And kind of in the same vein, I mean, a lot of people made comments about how about working on bringing half the state out of abject poverty. A lot of talk about that.
What we're trying to do with education. That's why it should be academic oriented.
Right. And so in that same way, I mean, you know, can you explain to people how that does tie into other issues, the DEI side of things, such as bringing people out of poverty? For an example, I know a lot of the policies, you know, instead of spending money bringing people out of poverty, money set aside for it, they study things like how does homelessness affect racial people differently or something like that. I mean, do you see a lot of that going on where money's going to waste within government on these types of DEI ideas in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, the only people getting wealthy because of DEI are the highly paid DEI consultants and oftentimes the equity officers. The example I always love pointing to is Fort Worth, the city of Fort Worth. Fort Worth School District is one of 20 school districts in the Fort Worth metropolitan area. So it's not a huge district. They had a dozen full-time, non-classroom paid members of their equity team. And that's Fort Worth. This is not Austin. This is not Berkeley. This is not Boulder. It's Fort Worth, Texas. That's how embedded this nonsense is. So the only ones really making money on it are the equity officers and the highly paid DEI consultants that corporate America got suckered into hiring, as did the Department of Defense. Now, being told that the world's against you and that you're oppressed, I don't think those are the words of motivational speakers that are, you know, really going to get an audience fired up to have a successful life. Those are words of defeatism. People should be taught that even if there are obstacles against you, if you work hard, if you study, if you do the right things, if you keep your nose clean, you can overcome them regardless of your skin color, regardless of your gender, regardless of who you're attracted to, because you're in the freest country that's ever existed, in the most prosperous, greatest time in the history of mankind. Does it mean there's no problems in the world? Of course not. Does it mean there's no racism in America? Of course not. But you can't find a better time on the timeline across the history of mankind than right now for opportunity. And people should be taught that. Go to school, work hard, go get a trade if you don't want higher education, and you can succeed overcoming adversity. They should be taught a motivational message, not a depressing, self-defeating one.
Yeah, absolutely, Adam. Can't agree with you more. Well, Adam, thank you for continuing to do your work here in Kentucky and across the nation. People can find out. I know you have DEI in Kentucky, correct? DEI
That's right,
in
DEIinkentucky.com. You could send one message that goes directly to the relevant trustees and some of the leaders within your state.
So that's DEIinkentucky.com to be able to get active on this issue, DEIinkentucky.com. You will see that link there in the comments or in the podcast description, so you guys can kind of find it there. Well, Adam, thank you, though, so much for your time, sir. And until next time, I'll see you. Thank you for having me. Absolutely. Well, I want to once again thank Adam for his time coming on the show, talking to us about the work his group is doing. Now, switching gears up, I do want to talk about one bill, Senate Bill 199. This is a very interesting bill, to say the least. As of right now, it's passed the Senate. It's over in the House. It should get a hearing tomorrow. What does the bill do exactly? Well, it specifically is targeting immunity from civil action from certain companies, but this is mainly for here. Bayer's the main supporter of this bill, and let's see here. So Senate Bill 199 shields pesticide manufacturers from accountability even when their products cause real harm like cancer, while pretending it's just about helping farmers. So what does the bill actually do? Well, the bill says that it helps farmers make sure they get essential access to pesticides by saying that, well, if the EPA has cleared it and they have the EPA required labeling on it, then it is shielded from any kind of failure to warn lawsuits. So it simply says, look, we're going to let the EPA decide what is a proper failure to warn labeling. And if the EPA says it's good enough for them, it's good enough for us. You can't sue them civilly. Now, I want to be really clear on what I know about any of these products. Nothing at all. Nothing at all. I don't need to be a scientific expert on these products. Neither do you. Here's what I do know for a fact. One, I know that anybody sitting there saying whatever the EPA says is good enough for me hasn't been paying attention for like 6-7 years. Can I remind you about COVID? Can I remind you about the COVID vaccine? Can I remind you about all the false statements said around it? Can I remind you that Fauci literally had to be given a pardon? The head of the NIH, the head of helping make sure these drug manufacturers and the information being put out is correct and taking into account everybody's safety. Do I have to remind you that he had to be given immunity? Immunity from the president, a pardon. Do I have to remind you about the FDA's own board members having to step down and quit because they're like, look, this is not following proper process at all? Do you really think the government is best positioned to not be taken advantage of by, multi-billion-dollar corporations that are working the system in order to get what they need done as far as the controls go? It was never envisioned to be that way in this country. And this is why I don't have to be an expert on this to know. When our founders envisioned this country, they didn't envision a large government that would regulate every single thing they would do. No, they believed, and this is why it's in our Constitution, It's in our civil courts. Now, you may be somebody who's against frivolous lawsuits and everything else and think we need some sort of tort reform to somehow work out a way to kind of make the civil process, the civil lawsuit process, more even-handed, where an individual can't be, essentially robbed of due process by a richer, more powerful corporation, obviously paying a lot of money for attorneys to constantly go after them and file things, and then they have to keep shelling out money for an attorney, and eventually they can't afford it, so it gets rid of the lawsuit. While at the same time saying that, look, all these people filing frivolous lawsuits hoping to just get, 10, 20, 30, 100 grand settlements because to the company, they know it's cheaper to just settle with you than to actually pay for the entire legal process that they'll have to go through. So it's cheaper for them just to settle with you and make you go away. And then that in turn drives up the cost of things, drives up the cost of healthcare, drives up the cost of items. Yeah, sure. I can hear that and I can see. I'm not going to pretend like I know exactly what the solution is. But if you believe in a smaller government, and if you believe that you don't want a government that's overbearing and regulating every part of our lives, then you should believe that the regulatory process involves two things then. Citizens regulating, one, through their pocketbooks, saying, if I don't like a product, I'm not going to buy it. And then two, citizens, if they're damaged by a company, getting redress in civil courts. And the civil court process is pretty stringent. It's not like you just get any wackadoo in there. How it works, you have a right to a trial by jury there in civil court. So you have a jury sitting there. And then they hear from experts that each side has gotten to challenge before the jurors get to hear from these experts. The judge oversees hearings where they challenge the experts that maybe they're not really experts in a product. And so they have to lay out their credentials and explain why they're an expert. It's not any Yahoo off the street. It's not any person who's just Googled whatever is allowed to testify. It is actual experts. So an impartial jury that's selected by people challenging and removing people and so on and so forth sits there. So there's even a process to get a impartial jury, sits there and listens to vetted experts that both sides have gotten to challenge each other's experts to claim they're not really experts, and then decide who's right and who's wrong. Doesn't that sound like a better regulatory process than unelected bureaucrats that are getting appointed maybe to these positions because certain companies did certain political favors for certain people? Shelled out enough money to be able to control the system, getting to decide what's good, what's bad. If only there was a process like what I just described. Oh, there is. It's called a civil courts. Something guaranteed to us by the Constitution, something that SB 199 takes away. Now, you may say, well, Andrew, you did mention, though, the financial side of things. People maybe just won't buy these crops that have carcinogenic things in them. But you're missing how farm subsidies exactly work. You see, in order to make sure farmers keep farming and growing and everything else, the government, to a degree, and there's a lot more to it than this, and I'm highly simplifying it, but the government guarantees farmers will make a certain amount based upon the crops they grow. And so all the farmer cares about is, well, can I grow enough crop? They don't really care a lot of times, not all of them, but a lot of farmers, if they know the government's going to buy it no matter what at this price, they don't care what the actual, does this cause cancer? I don't know. I don't care. I just care about being able to produce enough crop so I get my check. Farming's hard. It's expensive. There's a lot of other factors going into this, such as these companies that are controlling part of the regulatory process on the other side of things, like take the beef processing and meat processing side of things. That's, 80, 90% of the processors are controlled by 4 companies. And so if you want to sell, if you're doing a mass cattle farming, for example, and you want to sell hundreds of heads at a time to a company, well, there's only a few companies out there that can buy that can process that. So they get to set the prices. And that can hurt your bottom line too as a farmer. But that's because of, once again, over-regulation coming not from the people, not from civil courts, not from people talking with their pocketbooks, but instead is coming once again from that same government. That's why I believe Senate Bill 199 is wrong. Anything that is outright denying something guaranteed to us in the Constitution, no matter what that is, freedom of speech, ability to own guns, or our right to redress in civil courts, I stand against. I'm a conservative. I'm a constitutional conservative. Of course, I'm going to stand against it. And I also don't trust our federal government's regulatory process. And if you do, I'm sorry, but you're kind of a fool to trust it 100% like that. Well, y'all, that's what we got time for today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. I thank y'all so much for joining me. We'll be back here next week. I hope you have a great rest of your day.